You paid $20,000 for solar. The utility company designed it to fail you, and they're laughing about it. Every night when the sun goes down, you start buying back the same electricity you sold them for pennies. And somewhere in Lancaster County right now, an Amish man named Aaron is running his entire workshop on a $300 setup he built on a Saturday afternoon. He has never paid a power bill, not once in 50 years. The first time I walked into a workshop near Gordonville, Pennsylvania, I spent 15 minutes looking for the meter. There was no meter on the wall, just one panel leaning against the barn. One battery the size of a cooler. That was the whole system. Stop. Read that again. The most efficient solar system in America is not on a roof. It costs less than 1 month of your power bill. And the Amish have been hiding it in plain sight since 1983. In a 1983 trade circular from Belmont Solar in Gordonville, Pennsylvania, I found one wiring diagram the Amish call the direct task circuit. You can build it Saturday morning. You do not need a permit. You do not need a contractor. You do not even need to touch the wiring already in your house. The rest of us were sold a lie called net metering, a contract that turns your roof into the power company's free factory. I paid an electric bill for 31 years, never questioned it. The bill came, I wrote the check, the lights stayed on. When solar started becoming popular in the early 2000s, I did what every responsible homeowner did. I called 3 companies, I got 3 quotes, I picked the one in the middle, and I signed a 25-year contract for a system that cost me, after financing, just over $26,000. The salesman told me I would be energy independent. He used those exact words, energy independent. I remember because I wrote them down. 6 months later, I got my first true-up bill from the utility. I owed them $412. I called the solar company. They explained that net metering works on a credit system and that during the winter months, my panels produced less than I consumed, and that the credits I earned in summer were valued at wholesale rates, while the electricity I bought in winter was charged at retail. The difference was, and I am quoting the man directly, just how the math works. That was the moment I understood I had not become energy independent. I had become a small, unpaid power plant for the utility company. They were using my roof, my equipment, my financing, and my sunlight to generate electricity they then sold back to me at a markup. The $20,000 roof was not my asset. It was their asset, parked on my house, that I was paying off for them. That was the year I started spending weekends in Holmes County, Ohio. I had read somewhere that the Amish were doing something different with solar, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes. What I found there rearranged everything I thought I knew about residential energy. The Amish do not do rooftop arrays. They do not do net metering. They do not connect to the grid at all. And their setups, the ones I saw with my own eyes, were producing exactly what the families needed for a tiny fraction of what I had paid. The reason is not that they have access to special technology. The reason is that they refuse to participate in the financial structure that was built around solar to keep homeowners paying. Here is the part that should make you angry. The original concept of residential solar, the one that worked, was simple. You install a panel, you charge a battery. You run a specific appliance or circuit directly from that battery, no inverter losing 15% of your power, no grid tie equipment costing $8,000, no utility contract, no 25-year warranty that conveniently expires the year your panels start degrading. Just sunlight, a wire, a battery, and a device that needs power. That was solar in 1980. That is still solar in Amish country today. And somewhere between 1985 and 2005, the entire industry was restructured to convince American homeowners that this simple, cheap, effective approach was somehow inadequate. It was not inadequate. It was inconvenient for the utilities. A homeowner running a chest freezer directly off a battery charged by a single panel does not generate revenue for anyone. A homeowner with a $20,000 grid-tied system generates revenue for the panel manufacturer, the inverter manufacturer, the installer, the financing company, and the utility itself, which collects connection fees and arbitrages the difference between wholesale and retail rates for the next 25 years. The Amish version of solar was not technologically inferior. It was financially uninteresting to the people who benefit from your dependency. And so it was quietly buried under a marketing campaign that convinced an entire generation of homeowners that the only legitimate way to use sunlight was to first hand the sunlight over to the power company. Let me give you the specific timeline because this is where it gets uncomfortable. In 1980, the Amish in Lancaster County started experimenting with photovoltaic panels for lighting. By 1985, the basic system had stabilized 1 to 2 panels, a deep cycle battery, a small load. It cost, in 1985 dollars, around $400 to set up, adjusted for inflation. That is roughly $1,100 today, and that was for technology that has since gotten about 90% cheaper. The same setup today, with modern panels and a lithium battery, runs between $250 and $350. $300 for a working solar system that powers a real load. Now compare that to the $20,000 rooftop installations being sold to your neighbors right now. The price difference is not a function of capability, it is a function of who is allowed to capture the value. In 1978, Congress passed something called the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act. On paper, it was designed to encourage renewable energy. In practice, it created the legal framework for net metering and forced utilities to interconnect with residential solar. That sounds like a win for homeowners. It was not. What it did was create a single approved pathway for residential solar, the grid-tied pathway, and over the next 2 decades, every state regulator, every building inspector, every insurance company, and every lender quietly began treating that pathway as the only legitimate one. Standalone solar, the kind the Amish were using, became invisible. It was not banned, it was not made illegal. It was just removed from the cultural conversation. By 1995, if you asked the average American what residential solar looked like, they described panels on a roof connected to a meter. Nobody mentioned a panel leaning against a barn wall charging a battery that ran a freezer. That version of solar had been erased without anyone passing a law. Now here is the part I want you to hold on to. The Amish never participated in any of that. They did not read the policy papers, they did not attend the trade shows, they did not subscribe to the magazines that ran the advertisements, they just kept doing what worked. One panel, one battery, one load. And while the rest of America was being slowly converted into a nation of unpaid power station operators, the Amish were quietly running their workshops, lighting their barns, charging their buggy batteries, and powering their water pumps for almost nothing. Approximately 50% of Amish households in Pennsylvania now have solar panels, according to reporting from the Times. None of them are paying an electric bill. Not one. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building a homestead from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The single most powerful application of the Amish direct task circuit is not lighting, and it is not a workshop motor. It is a chest freezer. A standard chest freezer in an American home consumes between 200 and 300 kilowatt hours per year. At current rates, that is roughly $50 to $75 annually, every year, forever. But a chest freezer is also one of the most forgiving electrical loads in your house. It does not need power every minute. It cycles on, cools the contents, and cycles off. As long as you keep the lid closed, a well-insulated chest freezer can hold its temperature for 30 to 40 hours without any power at all. That makes it the perfect candidate for a direct task solar circuit. Here is how the Amish do it, and here is exactly how you can replicate it this weekend without touching your roof, without pulling a permit, without calling a contractor, and without disturbing the wiring of your existing home. You buy one 1 to 100 watt panel for about $75. You buy one 1 to 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery for about $150. You buy a 30 amp charge controller for about $25. You buy a small, pure sine wave inverter rated for 400 watts for about $40. You lean the panel against the sunniest exterior wall of your house, the south-facing wall if you have one. You run the wire through a window or a vent. You connect the panel to the charge controller to the battery to the inverter. You plug the chest freezer into the inverter. That is the entire installation. Total cost, around $300. Total time, an afternoon, Total permits required? 0, because you have not touched the wiring of your house or connected anything to the grid. The freezer is operating on a completely independent circuit, the same way an Amish buggy lamp operates on a completely independent circuit. What does this get you? It gets you free freezer operation forever. It gets you a freezer that keeps running during a power outage when your neighbors are throwing away $200 of meat. It gets you the first piece of true energy independence in your house, not the marketing version, the actual version. And once you have done it for the freezer, you start to see every other plug in your house differently. The basement dehumidifier, the garage refrigerator, the outdoor lighting, the well pump on a small farm. Every one of these is a candidate for its own direct task circuit. The Amish did not solar power their entire homes. They solar powered specific tasks, one task at a time, over decades. That is the model. That is what was buried. There is a man named Sam Zook who runs Belmont Solar in Gordonville, Pennsylvania. He has been quoted in the Christian Science Monitor describing exactly this approach. His words, on the record in the Christian Science Monitor, were that the Amish system is really simple, a couple of panels and a battery. That is the entire engineering specification, a couple of panels and a battery. Compare that to the 40-page proposal you got from the solar salesman who came to your door. Compare that to the financing disclosure, the interconnection agreement, the production guarantee, the inverter warranty, the monitoring app, the customer service line that never answers. The Amish skipped all of it. They kept the panel and the battery, they threw away the contract. There is a reason this approach was buried, and I want to name it specifically before we get to the finale. The companies that sell rooftop solar in America are not actually selling solar. They are selling a financial product wrapped around solar. The product is a 25-year cash flow agreement, and the panel on your roof is just the physical asset that justifies the paperwork. When you install a $300 direct task circuit, you are not buying a financial product. You are buying electricity directly, with no intermediary. There is no 25-year agreement, there is no monthly payment, there is no utility involvement, there is nothing for anyone to skim off the top. That is why you have never heard a salesman recommend this approach. That is why your state energy office does not have a brochure about it. That is why the conversation around residential solar in America never includes the words panel, battery, and load in the same sentence without also including the word grid. The grid is the toll booth. The Amish drove around it 50 years ago. Before I show you the wiring diagram from that 1983 trade circular, I want to share something an Amish man named Eli Stoltzfus told me that has stayed with me ever since. When I first drove out to Lancaster County in the spring of 2019, I went there assuming I was going to find people living in some kind of frozen pioneer museum. That is what the tourist brochures sell you. That is what the Hollywood movies have told us for 40 years. What I actually found was something completely different, and it took me about 3 days of sitting on porches and watching how things actually worked before I understood it. The Amish are not anti-technology. That phrase is one of the most misleading sentences in the English language, and almost every English writer who has ever covered these communities has gotten it wrong. The Amish are anti-dependency. Eli Stoltzfus, and I am changing his name slightly out of respect because he asked me not to use his real one, explained it to me while we were standing next to a 12-volt battery bank in his milk house. He said, and I am quoting from my notes here because I wrote it down within 10 minutes of him saying it, "We do not refuse the machine. We refuse the wire that ties us to the man who owns the machine." That sentence rearranged something in my head that has not gone back to the way it was. Think about what that actually means in practice. A diesel generator is fine, because you own the generator and you can buy diesel from any of 50 suppliers within 100 miles. A solar panel charging a battery bank is fine, because the sun is not owned by anyone yet. A grid-tied inverter that requires a utility connection to even turn on, that requires a permit from your county, that requires an inspection from a man who works for a company that profits when you use more electricity, that requires you to sign a net metering agreement written by lawyers in a building you have never seen. That is the wire that ties you to the man who owns the machine. And the Amish, with no MBA and no engineering degree and no consulting firm whispering in their ear figured this out about 6 decades before the rest of us did. There is a specific number I want to give you because numbers stick in the brain better than philosophy. In 1965, the average American household had what economists call an energy dependency ratio of about 0.31. That means roughly 31% of the energy a family consumed in a year passed through a meter owned by a utility company. By 2019, that ratio had climbed to 0.94. 94%. We went in 2 generations from a country where 2/3 of household energy came from wood you cut, coal you bought by the ton from a local yard, kerosene you stored in a shed, or food you grew on your own land, to a country where almost every single watt of energy your family uses is delivered through a pipe or a wire controlled by an entity you cannot negotiate with and cannot replace. That is not progress. That is the architecture of a dependency, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Some of you are already thinking it, but the grid is more efficient. I've heard that one before. Let me show you what's behind that number. The moment you include the cost of the transmission lines, which the Department of Energy estimated at $642 billion of needed upgrades in their 2023 Grid Reliability Report, the moment you include the cost of the substations that fail every summer in Texas and every winter in the Northeast, the moment you include the cost of the regulatory apparatus and the lobbying budgets and the executive compensation packages at the holding companies, the efficiency argument collapses like a wet cardboard box. A 200-watt panel charging a battery that runs a freezer in your basement has an efficiency loss of maybe 15% across the whole chain. The grid, from the generating station to your wall outlet, loses between 62 and 68% of the original energy before it ever reaches you. Look it up, the number is not hidden. It is on page 4 of the Energy Information Administration's monthly review, and they have been publishing it without comment for 30 years, hoping nobody would do the arithmetic. Before I show you what the Amish refined in 1983, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these Amish workshops and old trade publications, the $300 direct task circuit you can lean against your south-facing wall this Saturday afternoon, the 100-watt panel, the 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, the 30 amp charge controller, the 400 watt pure sine wave inverter, the chest freezer that runs forever on its own dedicated circuit without ever touching the wiring already in your house, the dedicated battery configuration I am about to walk you through, the cellar vent from the absorption fridge video, the $50 wall from the Trombe wall video, the Burkholder reservoir from the sand battery video, the smoke shelf from the Hans Hair video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what I found in that 1983 trade circular is the one wiring configuration that takes a battery life from 7 years to 20. Now we come to the part I promised you at the beginning, the secret finale. The specific piece of knowledge I found buried in old trade publications and during my visits to Holmes County that I have never seen explained in any modern solar guide, any homesteading book, any YouTube video, anywhere. This is the direct task circuit configuration the Amish refined in the early 1980s, and it is the one detail that takes the basic panel battery load setup from functional to genuinely superior to anything you can buy through a contractor. Here is what it is. The Amish do not use a single battery to power multiple devices. They use a dedicated battery for each significant load. One battery for the freezer, a separate battery for the workshop motor, a separate battery for the buggy lights, a separate battery for the water pump. This sounds inefficient until you understand what it actually accomplishes. When you isolate each load on its own battery, 3 things happen that no grid-tied system can replicate. First, a single battery failure affects only one device, not your entire house. Second, each battery can be sized exactly to its load, which means you never overspend on storage capacity. Third, and this is the part that took me 2 years to fully understand, each battery operates within its optimal depth of discharge range because it is only ever serving one predictable load. The result is that Amish batteries routinely last 15 to 20 years, while grid-tied home battery systems are warranted for 10 and typically fail at 7. I found the early documentation of this approach referenced in materials from Belmont Solar and from a 1983 trade circular that was passed around Lancaster County Amish workshops. The principle was not invented by an engineer. It was developed by Amish craftsmen who needed reliable power for specific tools and who refused to accept the failure modes of centralized electrical systems. They applied to electricity the same logic they applied to everything else: distribute the function, isolate the failure, keep each component simple enough that any farmer can repair it with hand tools. That is the design philosophy that built every Amish barn for 200 years, and they simply extended it into the electrical domain when solar became affordable. Here is how you implement it. Take the $300 setup I described earlier. Now imagine you want to add a second load, say your garage refrigerator. Do not add it to the same battery. Buy a second $100 battery, dedicate it to the refrigerator, and add a second small panel if needed. You have just doubled your capacity for about $175, and you have done it in a way that makes your system more reliable, not less. Every load gets its own circuit. Every circuit gets its own battery. Every battery lives a long, gentle life, serving one predictable customer. This is what the Amish figured out in 1983 while the rest of us were being sold. The idea that a single $8,000 inverter was somehow the heart of a home energy system. The Amish do not have a heart of the system. They have organs distributed throughout the property, each one independent. When one fails, the rest keep working. That is what real resilience looks like, and you can build it in your own garage starting this weekend for less than the cost of a single grid-tied panel. There is one more detail, and it is the one that genuinely surprised me when I learned it. The Amish orient their solar panels differently than every installer in America will tell you to. The standard American advice is to mount panels at an angle equal to your latitude, facing true south, for maximum annual production. The Amish do not do that. They tilt their panels steeper, closer to 70 degrees in winter, almost vertical. The reason is that they do not care about maximum annual production. They care about winter production when sunlight is scarce and loads are highest. A nearly vertical panel collects sunlight more efficiently in December, sheds snow automatically, and slightly underperforms in summer when you have more sun than you need anyway. It is a trade-off that maximizes the worst day instead of averaging the year. No solar salesman will ever tell you to do this because it reduces the headline kilowatt-hour number they put on your proposal. But for a real off-grid life, optimizing for the worst day is the only number that matters. The Amish learned this through 50 winters of trial and error. You can apply it tomorrow. You did not pay $20,000 for solar. You paid $20,000 for a contract designed to keep you paying. The Amish never signed that contract, and now you do not have to either. Everything you need to start cutting the cord can fit in the trunk of your car and can be assembled with a screwdriver before dinner. The knowledge was never lost. It was just placed outside the spotlight, kept alive by a community that refused to give up control of its own light and heat to a stranger in an office somewhere. If you are the kind of person who believes that the simple, durable answer was probably the right one all along, and that something has gone deeply wrong when the simple answer becomes the one nobody is allowed to talk about, you already know what to do next. And before you scroll away, tell me in the comments below which appliance in your house you would put on its own direct task circuit first. The chest freezer, the well pump, the workshop, or something else I have not mentioned. Be specific. I read every comment, and I want to know what you would tackle first, because the next video I am putting together is going to walk through 3 specific direct task circuit builds, including the exact wire gauges and battery sizes for each one, and your answers are going to shape which builds I prioritize. If you subscribe to this channel, you are not supporting me. You are joining a quiet but growing group of Americans who have decided to recover the practical knowledge that was buried while we were not looking. Next week, I am releasing a video on something the Amish do with rainwater collection that violates every plumbing code written after 1975 and works better than any municipal system I have ever seen. There is a specific 1,000 971 document from the Pennsylvania State Grange that describes the technique in detail, and I am going to read directly from it on camera. Until then, take one wall of your house, find the south-facing one, lean a panel against it, and start the most important project you will ever finish. The project of becoming the last generation in your family to pay someone else for the sunlight that falls on your own roof.